Hello, I'm Jay, and this is Relax with Jay. I create calming videos that allow you to relax and or drift off to sleep. If you enjoy my videos and find them helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe, and click on the notification bell. I hope you enjoyed this video and may it bring you restful sleep. Tonight, I'll be reading the fourth part of the story called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. If you enjoyed this part and would like me to read more, please let me know.
In this way, matters went on for some time without producing any material effects on the relative situation of the contending powers. On a fine autumnal afternoon, Archibald, in pensive mood, sat enthroned on the lofty stool from the whence he usually watched all the concerns of his little literal realm. In his hand he swayed a ferule, the spectre of dispense power. The breach of justice reposed on 3 nails behind the throne. A constant justice reposed in terror to evildoers, while on the desk before him might be seen sundry contraband article and prohibited weapons detected upon the person of idle urchin, such as half-munched apples, pop guns, wigglies, flag cages, and whole legions of rampant little paper gamecocks. Apparently there had been some appalling act of justice recently inflicted, for his scholar were all busily intended upon their books, or slightly whispering behind them, with one eye kept upon the master, and a kind of buzzing stillness reigned throughout the schoolroom. It was suddenly interrupted by the appearance of in a town cow jacket and trousers, round crowd fragment of a hat like cap of Mercury, and mount on the back of a rage, and wild half-broken colt, which he managed with a cope by way of halter. He came clattering up to the school door with the invitation to Archibald to attend a merry making or quaintly folk to be held that evening at Mariner Van Tassel's, and having delivered his message with that air of importance and effort that fine language withal is apt to display at pretty embassies of the kind, he dashed over the brook and even seen scrambling away up the hollow, full of importance and hurry in his mission. All was now bustle and hubble in the late quiet schoolroom. The scholars were hurried through their lessons without stopping in trifling. Those who were nimble skipped over half with impunity, and those who were tardy had a smart application now and then in the rear to quicken their speed or help over a tall word. Books were flung aside without being put away on the shelves. Inkstands were overturned, benches thrown down, and the whole school was turned loose an hour before the usual time, bristling forth like a legion of young nups, yielding and racketing about the green in joy at their early emancipation. The gallant Archibald spent at least an extra half hour at his toilet, brushing and furbishing up his best and indeed only suit of rustic black, and arranging his locks by a bit of broken looking glass that hung up in the schoolhouse, that he might make his appearance before his mistress in the true style of a cavalier. He borrowed a horse from the farmer with whom he was domiciled, a choleric old Dutchman of the name of Hans van Ripper, and thus gallantly mounted, issued forth like a knight-errant in quest of adventure. But it is met I should, in the true spirit of romantic story, give some account of the looks and equipment of my hero and his steed. The animal he bestrode was a broken-down fowl house that had outlived almost everything but vicariousness. It was gaunt and shagged, with an eel neck and head like a hammer, his rustic mane and tail was tangled and gnawed with burrs. One eye had been lost its pupil and was glaring and spectacle, but the other had the gleam of a genuine devil in it. Still, he must have had fire and mental in this deed, if we do may judge from the name he bore of Gunpowder. He had, in fact, been a favorite steed of his master's choleric Van Ripper, who was a furious rider and had infused, very probable, some of his own spirit into the animal, for old and broken down was as he looked. There was more on the lurking devil in him than in any other flea in the country. Archibald was a suitable figure for such a steed. He rode with short stirrups, which brought his knees nearly up to the pommel of the saddle. His sharp elbows stuck out like grasshoppers, and he carried his whip peremptorily in his hand like a spectre, and as his horse jogged on, the motion of his arm was not unlike the flapping of a flying of birds. A wear of small wool was hat rested on top of his nose, so his scanty strip of forehead might be called, and the shirt of his black coat fluttered out almost to the horse's tail. Such was the appearance of Archibald and his steed as he shambled out of the gates of Hans Van Ripper, and it was altogether such an apparition as he seldom to be met with in broad daylight. It was, as I have said, a fine autumnal day. The sky was clear and serene, and nature wore that rich and golden livery which we always associate with the idea of abundance. The forest had put on their sober brown and yellow, while some trees of the tenderer kind had been nipped by the frost into brilliant dyes of orange, purple, and scarlet. Streaming flies of wild ducks began to make their appearance high in the air. The bark of squirrel might be heard from the groves of beech and hickory nuts, and the pensive whistle of the quail at interval from the neighboring stubble field. The small birds were taking their furful blankets in the fullness of the revelry. They fluttered chippery and frolicking from bush to bush and tree to tree, capricious from very profusion and variety around them. There was the honeyest cock, robin, and favorite game of stripling sportsmen, which its loud chorus note, and the twittering blackbird flying in sable clouds, and the golden-wigged woodpecker with his crimson chest, his broad black gorget and splendid plumage, and the cedar bird with its red-tipped wings and yellow-tipped tail, and its little mentorial cap of feathers, and the blue jay, that noisy socksbaum in his grey, light and blue cock, and white underclothes, screaming and chattering, nodding and bobbing and bowing, and pretending to be on good terms with every songster of the grove. As Archibald jogged slowly on his way, his eye, ever open to every symptom of culinary abundance, raged with delight over the treasures of jolly autumn. All of the sides he behaved vast store of apples, some hanging in opulence on the trees, some gathered into baskets and barrels for the market, others heaped up in rich piles for the cedar press. Further on beheld great fields of Indian corn, with its golden ears peeping from their leafy coverts, and holding out the promise of cakes and hasty pudding, and the yellow pumpkins lying beneath them, turning up their fair round billies of the sun, and giving ample prospect of the most luxurious of pies and onion. He had passed the fragrant buckwheat fields breathing the odor of the beehive, and he has beheld them. Soft anticipation stole over his mind of dainty slapjacks, well buttered and garnished with honey or trestle by the delighted little dimpled hand of Catherine Van Tassel. Thus feeding his mind with many sweet thoughts and sugared supposition, he journeyed along the sides of the range of hills which looked out upon some of the goodliest scenes of the mighty Hudson. The sun gradually wheeled his broad dusk down in the west. The wind bosom of the Tappan Zee lay motionless and glassy, expecting that here and there a gentle undulation wave and prolong the wind shadow of the distant mountain. A few amber clouds floated in the sky without breath of air to move them. The horizon was of a fine golden tint, changing gradually into a pure apple green and from into the deep blue of the mid-heaven. A slanting ray lingered on the woody crest of the precipices that overhung some parts of the river, giving the greater depth to the dark gray and purple the rocky shades. A slopey was loitering in the distance, dropping slowly down with the tide, her sail hanging uselessly against the mast, and as the reflection of the sky gleamed along the still water, it seemed as if the vessel was suspended in the air. It was toward evening that Archibald arrived at the castle of the Herr Ventussel, which he found thronged with the pride and flower of the adjacent country. Old farmers, a spare lantern-faced race, a homespun coat and breeches, blue stockings, huge shoes, and magnificent Peter buckles. Their brisk, withered little dames, in close-crimped caps, long-waisted short gown, homespun petticoats with scissors and percussion, and gay calock, pockets hanging on the outside. Buxom lasses, almost as antiquated as their mothers, excepting where a straw hat, a fine ribbon, or perhaps a white frock, gave symptom of city innovation. The son, in short skirted shorts, with the row of stupendous broad button, and their hair generally queued in the fashion of the times, especially if they could procure an eel skin for the purpose. It been esteemed throughout the country as a permanent nourisher and strength of the hair. Broombones, however, was the hero of the scene, having come to the gathering on his favorite steed Daredevil, a creature like himself, full of mettle and mischief, and which no one but himself could manage. He was in fact noted for preferring vicarious animals, given to all kinds of tricks which kept the rider in constant risk of his neck, for he held a traceable, well-broken horse as unworthy as a lad of spirit. Fain would I pause to dwell upon the world of charm that burst upon the enraptured gaze of my hero, as he entered the staid parlor of Ventussel's mansion. Not those of the beeve of the buxom lasses with their luxurious display of red and white, but the ample charms of a genuine Dutch country tea table in this sumptuous time of autumn. Such heaped of platters of cake of various and almost indescribable kinds known only to experienced Dutch housewives. There was the draughty donut, the tender oil cake, and the crisp and crumbling cruller, sweet cakes and short cakes, ginger cakes and honey cakes, and the whole families of cakes. And then there were apple pies and peach pies and pumpkin pies, besides the slices of ham and smoked beef, and moreover delightful dishes of preserved plums and peaches and pears and quinces, not to mention boiled shad and roasted chicken, together with bowls of milk and cream, all mingled higgledy piggledy, pretty much as I have imaginated them, with the motherly teapot standing up to clouds of the vapor from the midst. Heaven bless the mark! I want breath and time to discuss this banquet as it deserves, and am no longer too eager to get on with my story. Happily, Archibald Crane was not in so great a hurry as his historian, but he ample justice to every dainty. He was a kind and thankful creature, whose heart delighted in proportion as his skin was filled with good cheer, and whose spirit rose with eating, as some men do with drink. He could not help to rolling his large eyes round him as he ate, and chuckling with the possibility that he might one day be lord of this scene of almost unimaginable luxury and splendor. Then he thought how soon he'd turn his back upon the old schoolhouse, snap his fingers in the face of Hen Van Ripper and every other near patron, and kick any ignorant pedagogue out of the doors that should dare call him comrade. Old Bartus Van Tassel moved about among his guests with face delighted with content and good humor, round and jolly as the harvest moon. His hospitable attention were brief but expressive, being confined to shake of the hand, a slap on the shoulder, a loud laugh, and a pressing invitation to fall to and help themselves. And now the sound of the music from the common room or hall summoned to the dance. The musician was an old gray-headed who had been the irritated orchestra of the neighborhood for more than half a century. His instrument was as old and battered as himself. The greater part of time he scraped on 2 or 3 strings, accompanying every movement of the bow with a motion of the head, bowing almost to the ground and stomping with his feet however and whenever a fresh couple were to start.